lady. We know her as the Magic Engine and the caretaker of the Magic Railroad. But there was more to her story than we know, especially in our universe. She wasn't just a goddess of the railway, but as you listen, you'll understand how the legend was created. It was the year of 1882, and Daniel Eves and a wizard named Carlos Thompson II, son of the mighty wizard Carlos Thompson I, had plans to create an engine, hoping it would defeat a very powerful demon they named Loki. A god of mischief, but also a god of destruction, who terrorized their home. The engine was completed in 1885 and was coated with a red and black livery. The engine was a hybrid from a 222 Gazelle and a Dodman & Co. 042WT. It was originally supposed to be a GWR 3031 class, but Carlos said it wouldn't handle right on the sharp bends. The engine worked well in the yards as a shunter and often pulled the small goods trains. But to make it powerful was the tricky part. Loki would terrorize the railway every month on the 24th and wreak havoc and destruction. But for some reason, Loki was afraid of the engine and stayed away from it at all cost. David couldn't understand why, but Carlos definitely knew why. He could sense that their engine had more power in it than they anticipated. They talked it over and wanted to try and find a way to make their creation more powerful and stronger, but they didn't know how. Until Carlos had an idea. I got it! My father's coal supply!
What of it?
My father once told me his coal supply could take out even an entire army. What if we used it on her?
Her? What do you mean by her? Did you already name the engine?
Yeah, I named it after my wife, Nancy. Why, you don't like it?
No. I like it. I just didn't know you named it already. Not my point. Where's your father's coal?
I have a supply at my house, in a giant container in my basement.
Great. We'll get it tonight.
That night, they drove to Carlos's house and carried the container, loading it into David's truck, driving it back to the engine works. They stoked up the engine's firebox with the magic coal, and just like that, she steamed up as her lights activated and her whistle blew. She started hissing golden steam as it covered her smoke box, and sparks of gold dust circled around her. Neither Carlos nor David knew what was going on until they heard her voice.
Not fret, sirs, for I'm awake.
The smoke cleared as the engine now had a face where her smoke box door was. She smiled as she opened her eyes. They had done it! Their engine had become sentient and was finally able to defeat that damn demon everyone was afraid of. The engine, now known as Nancy, was able to hide her face using her smoke box door as a cover. Carlos said that this idea would work because it would make Loki believe that she was still a faceless engine. When the 24th of November came, Loki had appeared to wreak havoc and mischief throughout the station and its railway, until he saw the engine rolling out of the shed on its own. It hissed steam like it was about to explode, until she showed her face Loki was caught off guard, seeing how an engine who was once faceless and dependent on a driver and fireman could become non-faceless and independent of her own power. How dare you? You dare to challenge me?
Yes, I do challenge you. You have caused nothing but mischief and chaos to this world and its people. Now, I shall be the one to take you down and defeat you.
You really think you can beat me, God of Destruction? Foolish train. Fine then. Just remember, you shall be the first to perish by my wrath. The battle was fierce and extraordinary. Nancy had used the power of gold dust to lift herself off the tracks, and used her lamps to act like light cannons that would allow her to fire beams of energy. The battle went on for what felt like days. Nancy held her own, trying to take on this unforgiving god. Until it happened. Loki was out of breath and out of strategies. No! This cannot happen! There's no way I can lose to an engine!
I am Nancy, the magic engine of Great Britain. I hereby place a spell on you to trap you and no way to be freed.
Nancy's spell was used to trap the soul of Loki inside of an open plank wagon with an old outdated 1830s nuke that was emptied of his explosive gunpowder. The truck was then taken away, never to be seen again. The town cheered for their savior, but at a price that was indefinitely unfortunate. Nancy had used up too much energy and power, and had taken more damage than she expected. As a result, she had gone into a deep sleep, her face disappearing to only reveal a smokebox door. She had to go under massive repairs. By 1890, David had died, leaving in his will Carlos to be the caretaker of Nancy. She was later repaired in 1893 and had heard about David's death. Though heartbroken, she understood that life, like a flower in a sunny field, will eventually die. By 1899, she had been sold to the London Brighton South Coast Railway, or the LBSC, where she would meet a wise tank engine and a cheeky brother. By 1910, Nancy and Timothy grew closer than ever. She had shown him her special gold dust and managed to keep his cheeky brother out of danger. Secretly, Nancy had grown affections for Timothy, and both started to bond more along the days and months. Timothy was an old tank engine, so his parts were somewhat worn out, and always helped around the yard, especially when it came to number 108, whom we know as Thomas, but back then he never had a name. But one day, 108 accidentally bumped a train of goods vans into one of the bigger engines, and they weren't happy.
Hey, Tiny, watch what you're doing!
Oh, crud! I'm so sorry! I didn't mean to!
Just wait till I tell the manager. He'll have you scrapped, that's for sure.
Hey, jackass, that's my brother.
Pah, he's not worth the namesake of the London, Brighton, South Coast, Railway. Let you alone, brother.
Hey, you heard him, you big bully. Either collect your train or shove off. I don't care which.
Pah, you're not worth it anyway, but mark my words, 108. Neither your brother nor your mommy will save you for long.
Thomas, are
you
you
alright,
okay,
dear?
dear? Yeah, I'm okay.
Don't mind him, brother. He's just a self-centered prat, he is.
I know. Thanks, guys. We better get back to work before the manager starts lecturing us again about working and being busy. A few months had gone by, and Timothy was starting to get slower and tired. Since he was an older design of the E2 class, without the extended side tanks unfortunately, his parts were getting worn out even more, and he was being used less and less, leaving only 108 and Nancy to be stuck with all the shunting. Until 1927, Timothy was sold to Sodor. Before he left, 108 and Nancy would send their farewells.
Well, guys, I hope we meet again in the future.
I hope so too. We'll miss you, dear Timothy.
I'll miss you too, guys. Especially you, dear brother. Listen to Nancy and stay by her, okay?
I will, Timothy. Goodbye, brother.
Oi! Number 0, get going! You're supposed to leave an hour ago!
Yeah, I get it. Keep your shirt on.
And so, Timothy had left for the island of Sodor. But by 1930, Nancy's heart would be broken. Deep in Timothy's soul, Nancy had sensed that there was a darkness, hatred, and pain inside of him. One night, on the date of October 19th, 1930, Nancy couldn't sleep well. She could sense that something wasn't right. She could hear screams and someone begging Timothy to stop.
Timothy, stop! You're going to kill us all!
Nancy's eyes were shut real tight as tears fell from her eyes, trying to speak to Timothy and reason with him, but to no avail. Instead, Timothy's demons somehow managed to recreate Nancy's gold dust, but instead, it was lead dust. The exact opposite of good and kind. Timothy had fallen into the viaduct, ending with an evil laugh, screams and cries of the passengers, and sounds of metal being crushed and destroyed into a fiery end. Nancy had awoken in fear and sadness. She tried not to wake Thomas as she bit her lip and let the tears roll down her cheeks.
Timothy, how could you? You've done something unforgivable.
The next day, Nancy was asked to take a train of supplies for Barrow and Furness. As she left, the train was heavy, even for her. She started sliding downhill, reaching closer to the station. She slammed on her brakes, but it didn't slow her down. She whistled loudly for the signalman, who switched the points and sent her on a runaway siding. As she continued slamming on her brakes, her gold dust activated and sent her through the bumpers instead of smashing into them. The train, on the other hand, was in shambles. Thomas was devastated when he heard the news of Nancy's tragic accident. but no one knew she was still okay. She had opened her eyes and noticed she was in a peaceful meadow with the sun shining down on her boiler. She was on the only one set of track as she went down the line. As she got to the end of the track, she puffed through the buffers once more, ending up in a small worker's hut, where she met Burnett Stone. But when she introduced herself, she knew she couldn't be called Nancy no more. So she left that past behind her and called herself Lady. By 1950, Lady and Burnett had gotten along very well as she and he traveled down what she now called the Magic Railroad. To find she ended up next to a little grotto where she saw steam engines. She would spread her gold dust around the sky, spreading life to those engines and allowing them to be really useful. Unfortunately, this would be a calling card to two certain villains. One that exploited himself for greed, and the other just a warship 42. Burnett Stone had known an old friend who wasn't really into steam locomotives, but was only interested in scrapping them for money. His name was Peter Theodore Boomer, or P.T. Boomer for short. When he found out about Lady, he indeed wanted to sell her for scrap, but Burnett said no. This caused him to do something that almost took the life of Lady. Boomer had purposely removed her brakes and threw her regulator in action. She had noticed this and tried to slam on her emergency brakes, but they didn't work.
Hey, let me go. I'm not for scrap.
She would demand him to stop and turn back. But Boomer, being the arrogant, greedy man he was, wasn't listening, nor did he know how to stop her. His arrogance had caused him to crash into the warship Diesel, now with a hydraulic claw on top. She had switched to her smokebox door before the impact and was in a terrible shape. Now, she was not only without a dome or her side rods, but her entire smokebox was on fire and had a huge hole on the side of her. Burnett was upset, not just for losing his engine, but he was even more mad when he found out Boomer had destroyed his treasure. Time had passed and it was the year 2000. Burnett was still trying to bring Lady back. She had been in a very deep sleep, unable to awake or start. When something had happened on Sodor, the big Diesel, now known as Diesel 10, was terrorizing the island of Sodor, and Mr. Conductor was losing his gold dust since Lady was still in a coma. Thomas especially played a big part in this. He had to go through the magic buffers and take Lily, Burnett's granddaughter, back home. They ended up finding a coal truck that they could use to find a clue to bring back the gold dust. So Thomas coupled it up, and once they exited the buffers, they ended up on a cliffside on Muffle Mountain. Lily had left Thomas on the truck on the cliffside until the support underneath Thomas's wheels had collapsed. He had sped down the hill, running into a portal that led back to the Magic Railroad, but also led to a familiar face. Nancy? Is that you?
Nancy is no more. I am now called Lady. It's a pleasure to meet you again, Thomas.
Lady! Where did you go? I thought you disappeared like Timothy.
Don't mention his name again. He abandoned us and killed innocent lives.
Poor Thomas did not know this, nor did he know how bad Lady was hurt by his actions his brother had caused. What? What happened to my brother, lady? When Lady explained what he did and the red gold dust he created, Thomas was shocked beyond his doubts. He had never known that Timothy, his own brother, had suffered that much. He could see that she was still in pain because of his actions, but wanted nothing to do with him now. She could sense the island of Sodor and Shining Time Station were indeed in trouble, but she had a plan.
Thomas, the coal truck you brought with you, where is it?
It must be on the cliffside.
Excellent. Keep puffing down the lane, and I will lead you the way out. We will save our homes, Thomas.
Thomas did as she instructed and puffed down the track. Moments later, the dark blue trees that once surrounded him were turning green. He could soon hear Lady's lost whistle and smiled. The trees began to vanish and had transformed into the soft sunny meadows that Lady had once traveled 70 years ago. There in the distance was an engine that looked like Nancy, but she wasn't coated with the red and black livery. She was now a magenta and gold livery. Thomas smiled and whispered under his breath, "Goodbye, Nancy. And thanks. On with the show, right?" Then he let out a whistle, letting Lady know he was behind her. "You found her! And she's beautiful!" This had secretly made Lady smile as they continued their journey down the magic railroad. As they exited, there waiting for them was Diesel 10, who wanted to take out the magic engine once and for all. The chase was now on, but Thomas wasn't gonna let Lady down.
Now I'll get you, Burnett Stone.
No, you won't, Diesel, because the magic you refuse to believe in will get the better of you.
The chase felt like it was going on for hours, and Thomas was especially low on coal. He could feel himself getting slower and slower, until Lady's whistle went off and shot Thomas with a blast of gold dust, which made his bunker filled with coal to the brim. They raced away to the viaduct, which Lady had warned Thomas about the viaduct. It was a symbolism to their worlds, soon to be crumbling into nothing. They hurried as fast as they could, managing to get far from Diesel's sight. But now they had to make it before the viaduct collapsed.
Well, lady, this is your shining time too.
With your help, Burnett.
Come on, Lady! Little engines can do big things! Then it happened. Thomas and Lady made it over the viaduct just before it collapsed. They were glad they made it, but they knew Shining Time was gone. But not for long. Mr. Conductor, Junior, Lily, and Burnett had solved the riddle to bring back the gold dust and restore the magic to the island of Sodor and to Shining Time Station. At the end of the day, Thomas and Lady had to depart ways from their adventure.
Thank you, Thomas, for everything.
It was no trouble at all, Lady. I was glad to help you and Mr. Conductor. Just wish I could have done more to help Timothy.
You did nothing wrong, Thomas. If anything, I still remember you as that cheeky little engine who wanted to see the world. But you have intended matured a lot. No matter what happens, where you go, or what you do, I will always be there for you and your friends. Take care of yourself, Thomas, the tank engine. I love you.
Her last act of kindness was she blew a puff of steam from her funnel and traveled back to the magic railroad. Thomas was happy to see her once again. tears slowly falling from his eyes, but blew a whistle as he puffed away to the sunset to head home. And yes, as you may recall, Lady indeed helped Thomas again in the year 2005, when summer was fast approaching and all of Sodor was going into a spiral of chaos. Thomas had a dream of Lady. He dreamt of puffing into a misty area up in the hills near the narrow gauge railway, where she appeared from the cloud of steam, looking as happy as she could be. There, driving up next to her, was Rusty the Diesel. This surprised Thomas and wasn't sure what this meant.
We always finish our jobs if we work together.
Working together makes the job easier.
It was Lady's plan to use Rusty to help the engines of Sodor to work together so the airport could be built and the railway could run like clockwork. Time had moved on, and Lady had been keeping a watchful eye around the island of Sodor, using her magic to help any engine in need. Years had indeed passed, and unfortunately, in the year 2019, Burnett Stone had died. This hurt Lady so much, she had gone into a deep sleep. Lily was starting to take care of Lady, but she knew she couldn't restore the pain she and Lady had both felt, so she made a plan where Lady wouldn't have to suffer anymore. But I think you know what happened next, don't you?